It was a quiet evening, nothing special. My husband was standing at the sink, washing the dishes, when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. I just happened to glance at the screen. And in that single moment, something I believed about my marriage quietly started to fall apart. I never imagined that something so ordinary could quietly change the direction of my life. Looking back now, it still feels strange to admit that a simple glance at a phone screen was enough to unravel years of trust. That evening, I stood in my kitchen listening to the sound of running water and clinking dishes, feeling safe in the small routines I had built my life around. I thought I understood my marriage. I thought I understood the man I had chosen to grow old with. I was wrong. I had always believed stability came from consistency. I grew up in a home where emotions were rarely spoken aloud, but responsibilities were never ignored. My parents stayed together out of duty more than love, and I learned early that keeping things calm was better than asking difficult questions. When I met my husband, his quiet nature felt familiar. He wasn't dramatic or overly affectionate, but he showed up. He paid the bills, remembered appointments, and listened when I spoke. At least, I thought he did. I told myself that love didn't have to be loud to be real. In the early years, I ignored small moments of discomfort. He guarded his phone more closely than seemed necessary. He brushed off questions with gentle jokes. I convinced myself that privacy was healthy, that trust meant not needing answers to everything. Life moved on. We built routines, hosted family dinners, planned holidays. On the surface, everything looked fine. But there was a quiet loneliness that followed me, one I couldn't quite explain, even to myself. That evening in the kitchen wasn't supposed to mean anything. He was washing the dishes, humming softly, his phone resting on the counter beside me. When it vibrated, my eyes moved before my thoughts did. I didn't unlock it. I didn't touch it. I only saw a name and a short message preview. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't explicit. And somehow, that made it worse. The message suggested familiarity, history, and a tone that didn't belong to a stranger. I felt my chest tighten as questions rushed in all at once. How long had this been going on? Who was she to him? And why had I never heard her name before? I stood there frozen, listening to the water run, aware that something invisible but heavy had entered the room. He noticed my silence and glanced at me, his expression changing just enough for me to know that he sensed the shift. But he said nothing. That night, sleep felt impossible. I replayed moments from our past, conversations that suddenly seemed incomplete, memories that no longer fit together the way they once had. I realized how much of my marriage had been built on assumptions rather than understanding. The fear wasn't just about betrayal. It was about discovering that I had lived beside someone for years without truly knowing him. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore what I had seen. But I also knew that asking the wrong question at the wrong time could change everything. I stood at a crossroads, torn between protecting the life I knew and risking it all for the truth. And as I made my coffee, hands trembling slightly, I wondered whether knowing the truth would heal me, or break me completely. The days that followed felt heavier than I expected. Every small interaction carried a new weight, every shared silence stretched longer than before. I found myself watching my husband more closely, not out of anger, but out of confusion. I needed to understand who he was when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The hardest part was realizing how natural it felt to pretend everything was normal while quietly falling apart inside. Eventually, I asked him about the message. Not directly. Not accusingly. I mentioned the name casually, as if it had come up in conversation. The look on his face told me everything before he spoke. It wasn't panic. It was resignation. The kind that comes from carrying something too long. He sat down across from me and told me a story I had never heard, one that existed long before our marriage but had followed him quietly into it. She wasn't an affair in the way I had imagined. She was part of his past, a connection he had never fully closed, tied to promises he hadn't known how to let go of. He told me he didn't mean to hurt me. He told me he was protecting me. And for the first time, I understood that intentions don't erase impact. The betrayal wasn't just the secret itself, but the choice to decide for me what I deserved to know. I cried, not loudly but deeply. I mourned the version of my marriage I had believed in. I mourned the years I spent silencing my instincts. But somewhere in that grief, something shifted. I realized that staying silent had cost me more than any truth ever could. I told him what I needed, not promises, not explanations, but honesty. Real honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. The weeks that followed were slow and uncertain. We talked more than we ever had, sometimes painfully so. Some conversations ended in tears, others in quiet understanding. And I faced a decision I had avoided my entire life, whether to stay and rebuild with clearer boundaries, or to walk away with my dignity intact. There was no dramatic ending, no sudden clarity. Just a gradual sense of peace as I chose myself for the first time. Today, my life looks different. Not perfect, not painless, but honest. I've learned that love without truth is fragile, and that protecting peace sometimes means confronting what threatens it. I don't regret looking at that phone. It showed me that healing doesn't always come from what we discover about others, but from what we finally allow ourselves to face.